In a sense, that's right. But definitely, if these other things are there, it creates some vulnerability. And you need to understand, vulnerability does not mean it's necessarily going to happen. We're just talking about what kind of soil does it grow in. We're not saying it's definitely going to grow in that soil. I hope you understand this. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to help us understand ourselves and understand each other. Maybe even understand some things about our dads or our moms or our brothers, our sisters, our best friends, and think, oh my goodness, I think that's why. Wow. So if limerence begins to happen, it requires some kind of exposure to another person. Now, if you're single, it could be somebody that you met at church, somebody you met on one of the online dating services like Real Christian Singles. It can be all kinds of things. If you're married, those kind of things can still happen, although hopefully you're not disguising yourself as single and looking on Real Christian Singles, you understand. But people that you work with, people that you have exposure to, people that you serve on a certain committee with at church. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, I noticed anecdotally, in other words, I didn't do research on this, I just began to think about all the situations I'd encountered. And at that point, I was thinking, the most common place to find an affair partner, a paramour, is in the couple that's your best friends. Just this past week, I was talking to a friend again. She had gotten me to try to help a couple that were friends of hers a few years ago, and I did. And I was asking her, what was the final outcome of all that? The reason I was asking for the final outcome is I knew a lot about what happened, but here was something interesting. When she began to have some marriage problems, when they began to have some difficulty, she would confide in her best friend, another female, about how hurt she was and how much she loved her husband and etc. And this other female, this best friend, began to visit with the husband ostensibly to help him understand his wife. Now, when I say ostensibly, that's what she said. So let's just accept that that's true, whether it is or not, that was her motives and intention to begin with. When you start spending time with another person that you're attracted to, either physically or intellectually or emotionally or spiritually, and there aren't really borders or boundaries around that, and quite often people don't make them because they think we're good people. We would never do anything wrong. Everything's fine. We're just good people. In that particular situation with that couple, she went into limerence with her best friend's husband. And that's when I was asking, how did that finally turn out? I know he wound up divorced from his wife. Did he marry the other woman? And the answer was no, he finally went on to somebody after her. She was in limerence, he was not. He was more about the conquest. And I said, so what happened to the former best friend? Oh, she divorced her husband, and she's waiting, hoping that someday the man she was in limerence with will come back. Unfortunately, he will not. So we look at this, you say, then it could be a couple of our best friends. Yeah, because you spend time with them. It has to have some kind of interaction. So the interaction might be in person, face-to-face, when you go on trips together. It might be somebody you work with that you talk to a lot. It may be somebody that you interact a great deal with online, either through texting each other with your phones or contacting each other through Facebook and the private chats or any of those kinds of things, or a person even that you talk to on Skype or FaceTime or whatever it might be. But there has to be some kind of access to the other person. And over time, what happens is this. If either or both of them are people who want to feel love, and for whatever reason are looking for more affirmation, whether they realize it or not, then what they start doing after they do the normal things in polite talk, like, how's it going? All those kinds of things. If they talk a lot to each other, it can't just be small talk after that. And so it evolves into a situation where they start revealing things about themselves. Things that maybe they don't want the whole world to know because they fear that the other people around them will reject them. And if this person they're developing this new relationship with is very accepting and understanding, then they begin to reveal more about themselves. As a matter of fact, maybe telling this person things they've never told any other human being, even that far. And if they continue to receive acceptance from the other person, like, wow, I can see that, I understand, and they reciprocate, where the other person is self-revealing as well, then they are forming a strong emotional bond. Now think about it. If you have a best friend of the same gender, you've done that with him or her. You've let that person know things about you that the world doesn't know. You've opened up and shared, and you've confessed, and you've done all kinds of things like that. And that's what created the great strong bond of love, of close personal friendship. Now, when it's happening with a person in the situation where I'm describing, so that here are two people who work together, or they're singing on the praise team at their church together and start hanging out in the parking lot after the practice so they can talk to each other, and they just keep taking all of these barriers away to let the other person see not only the things that they have done, but the things that they feel. And they may wind up telling this person things about their emotions they've never told anybody else. That even though they may have been married 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years, they've never even told the spouse. But they feel so safe in this situation that they do with the other person. And if this reciprocity continues, where they're continuing to share this information with each other and about each other and accepting, it is a form of love. And that love can become extremely intense. Extremely intense. I remember reading a quote by Gottman a few years ago. Gottman is a guru when it comes to researching marriages, and particularly marriage problems. Brilliant, brilliant man. And he was saying that in his work, he found that most extramarital affairs were not about sex at all. They were really about feeling accepted and affirmed, that there was some emotional need that was not being fulfilled that began to be fulfilled by another person. Now, when a person first starts into that, I mentioned earlier there are 3 stages of limerence, so let me explain what those 3 stages are. The first stage I call infatuation, and it can be a relatively steep curve. What I mean by that is, for some people, the infatuation stage doesn't go real fast. And so, if you were going to draw it in front of you, you draw a line that doesn't go straight up, but slants. And for some, the slant can be, almost flat for a while, and then it starts going up. And when it does go up, it does not necessarily continue in a straight line. It actually can become a squiggly line, so that some points is higher and some points is lower as people go in and out of thinking, wow, I really am enjoying talking to this person and being with this person, but maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe this is a bad thing. And so it can actually be going up and then dip down a little bit and then kind of go back up again. So don't think it's like, drawing a straight side of a cliff up there. Can it happen that way? Yes. Have I seen it like that? I have. But with many people, it's not like that. So the first stage is what I call infatuation. Infatuation is basically, wow, I really am enamored of you. It starts off with a little bit of that, like I just enjoy the fact that I see you physically and or intellectually, emotionally, spiritually attractive, and you're paying attention to me. Well, I want to be with you more. I want to talk with you more. And so maybe it's a little bit of infatuation at that point where you're not even admitting to yourself that you really are attracted to that person as much as you are, or that you want to be with that person as much as you do. So you keep talking and sharing and all those kinds of things because you're good people. You're never going to do anything wrong. And as you get higher and higher in that infatuation, things begin to change because at some point, you're going to wind up hiding your interaction with each other. It may be because somebody questions it. It looks to me like you're spending too much time with that woman over there. What's this about? Oh, nothing. We're just friends. And so you start hiding. Or your husband said, honey, I noticed that when you go over to work out at the gym, it used to take you an hour, and now it takes 2. What's going on? And you don't want to tell him, well, I've met this guy over there that we kind of work out together, and then we wind up sitting over there and drinking our health water for another hour and just talking to each other. And so you hide. You deceive. You don't let other people know what's really happening. By the way, the first time you hide what you're doing, the first time you make it a secret, you've already crossed a boundary. You really have, whether you admit it or not. And as this gets more and more intense and becomes more and more secret, as this infatuation begins kind of overwhelming, where you find yourself dreaming about the other person or thinking about the person a lot, you get up really close to what is called, or what I call, phase 2. And when I say what I call, understand that I've not seen any research that there are three phases of limerence. I'm basing this off of the experience that we've had with thousands and thousands of research. As a matter of fact, we're about to do some more research, scholarly, social science research, and medical science research about limerence. I was just talking to one of the PhDs that's going to be part of that the other day. I was actually talking to one of the physicians, a medical doctor, who is going to be part of that the other day as well. So we will do more and more research about it. But right now, I'm telling you that when I talk about the three phases of limerence, I'm talking about things that I have seen. Therefore, I believe them to be true. And I can illustrate all the way through. Phase one, then, infatuation, which becomes stronger and stronger, even though sometimes it'll dip down and kind of go the other way, with that squiggly line. It gets stronger and stronger. And it gets really strong when you get secrets, even though sometimes even after that it'll dip down, because one of you will be going, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, because other people were talking about us, and so we decided to meet over there in the park, and those tables at the back during the daytime, because nobody goes there during a weekday, and that's where we take our lunch, and we just sit there and talk to each other. We go in different cars and different routes, and we talk about a lot of things, and I become so very open, and sometimes it's become a little, sexual innuendo in what we talk about over there. Maybe I need to quit this, and so he or she may say to the other person, I really enjoy this, but I think this is going the wrong direction. We need to stop. And then that squiggly line kind of goes down a little bit. If the other person is in limerence, and by the way, almost always one of them goes into limerence faster than the other. And if that person who's gone faster into the limerence is further up the line, closer to stage 2, which I'll explain in just a minute, and the one who's not quite up there is the one who's trying to pull away because he or she begins to feel guilt or think, this is not a good thing to do. The one who is deeper, faster, will do all kinds of things to get him or her back. They will do whatever it takes to pull the person back. It's not because they're evil, although I'm quite sure if it's happened to your spouse, you do perceive the other person as evil. It's a reaction they're having because of their limerence, like, this is fulfilling some kind of a need in me, and I don't want to lose it. And I realize why you're trying to pull away from me, but since this person knows a lot about you because of what you have shared about the facts of your life, what you have shared about the feelings of your life, then this person does whatever and everything it takes to keep pulling you back again and again and again until finally. And by the way, you won't go exactly the same speed. I've kind of indicated that already, but let me make that clear. One will typically go in faster than the other. And so one typically will reach stage 2 faster than the other. And stage 2 is called crystallization. Now, there are people who write about crystallization in limerence. So don't think that's just original with me. I'm the one who explains the 3 phases based on all the people that we work with. So in phase 2, even it is not a straight line across like a mesa or a plateau. It can be a squiggly line too. So that some days it's stronger and some days it's weaker. We'll kind of dip down some days stronger again. It actually becomes an emotional roller coaster. I mean, it's pretty intense. And in this emotional roller coaster, they do some things to try to diminish the pain and enhance the pleasure, even though they haven't really thought about it in those terms. What I mean is, because limerence is so emotional, it's not a logical thing at all. It's emotional. And in that emotion, a person's not logically thinking, wow, some parts of this hurt. How can I minimize that? Some parts of this actually feel pretty good. How can I enhance that? They're not doing that. They're doing it just because they're instinctively following what their emotions lead them to do. And so things start happening. Actually, they start happening in high infatuation. In other words, as they get toward the top in phase 1. Then in phase 2 is when it gets intense because they're crystallizing. So, for example, if you look back at the work of Tennov, one thing she would describe as somebody who is in limerence would be that anyone who came between the two of you would become the enemy. So if you go back to that kind of silly illustration from earlier where the 15-year-old girl brings home the guy that just got out of prison for murder, if the parents say he's not good for you, he's bad for you, then she'll tend to perceive her parents as the enemy. You've probably seen that at least on some minor scale with teenage girls throughout life. But let's take it back into adulthood and say, what about there?